So yeah, we are talking from the same pulpit, man. It's got to start with us. We have to, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, and we need to start truly holding the line. I like how you put in there. We'll talk about it, about the thin blue line, and it's really nothing for the outside world. It's a set of tenets on how we're supposed to treat each other. And when
Yeah.
we don't hold up to that standard, we can't be surprised when this thing of ours starts crumbling.
And what I do is I almost look at it from like an economist theory, right? So you talk about people who focus on the upper ultra rich, right? And for me, the metaphor that I use for that is those huge events, right? The heaven forbid a tragic death of a police officer or
Right.
some type of big to do. That's when you see the semblance of everybody come together and you see the blue line. I'm talking about focusing on the middle class, which is the overwhelming majority. And
Yeah.
that's the what? That's the everyday things. And it's free. You don't need ceremonies. You don't need white gloves. You don't need scrambled eggs, and you don't need budgets to do it. And
No.
I'm telling you, John, the future, in my opinion, we just came from an era that was focused, I think, hyper focused on what? Use of force reform and all of that.
Right.
I severely believe that the next chapter of what we're writing right now is going to be the resiliency movement. And we're going to have a unique opportunity to either get it right or to not. And here's why I say that. Never, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, have you seen issues dealing with recruitment and or retention as we are now? And if you dare to tell me it's because the threats of the job or the lack of public support or
Absolutely not.
the money,
They don't,
that's
it doesn't
all.
factor into it.
It's because of the cannibalism.
It's a
I'm
fucking
telling you that.
toxic environment. And who
I
wants to be a member of a toxic organization?
and it's not worth it. That's where it comes in. But what does the public do? The public assimilates that to, oh, they're saying because they don't make enough money, or they're saying because they'll never be
Yeah.
a millionaire.
You and I would do this
No,
job for free back in the day.
that's a fact. It's a fact.
Yeah, man.
It's a fact.
Let's
And
let's
again,
jump in.
and I
Let's jump into it, bro.
okay.
I love what you're. This is what I love what you do. I'm going to do my intro, and we're
Yeah.
just going to jump into it. I'm going to
Okay.
talk about the book. I want to put your information out there. I want to put your message out there, where people can go find you, where they can see you. I'm going to leak everything in the show notes. But there's some things in here, obviously, that I penned and I want to
Okay.
discuss. I want to
Okay.
discuss our inability to admit when we're wrong as leaders,
Yeah.
and the
Yep.
problem that creates. And I just listen. That woman, the person that was asking you for a quote or wanted to quote you in a book, was it? How was the name of the
Barbara.
Bob? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I gave her a quote. She wanted a quote. I wrote my little pamphlet of a book, and
Yeah.
so she and it was about being proactive,
Yep.
about how we manage our own lives. You
Yep.
want to talk about overcoming suicide? Okay. Um, when your personal life's in turmoil, when you shit on the only support network that is ever going to be there when you lose your job, which is your family, when you don't take care of family, you off
Yep.
yourself.
Yeah.
It's pretty direct correlation to it. So she
100%.
quoted me on something like that. I'm like, yeah, rock on, man. Whatever you want. I said,
Yeah.
the more hands in this thing that are trying to solve it, and not just, and we'll talk about some other things too, because there's some people in our space, brother, that there's just, I don't know. It's a little fucking too much, I think. It's a
Yeah.
little too much, But anyways,
Well, like anything else, I think because people see a quick buck and they're running to the table trying to do that.
right. It's just it's I cringe sometimes. Fucking lest I digress any further.
Okay.
Hey folks, welcome back. John Kelly with you, the law enforcement life coach. Sometimes heroes need help podcast. Guys, I've got Tom Rizzo with me today. And I've met Tom, electronically over social media. And not in a stalker weird way, man, but I've been keeping an eye on him, and he's just doing some amazing things. Because you know what? He's just calling it the way he sees it. And listen, anybody can point to the problem, but Tom is offering up solutions. And when you offer up solutions, man, you are doing this thing of ours such a service. Tom Rizzo authored the book Kamikaze, kind of like a kamikaze, and we'll get into that. It's a crucible to manage Mission Impossible. Awesome book. I'll put the links and everything in the show notes for you to pick it up. But a captain, an instructor for street cop training on the job, and just is so passionate about us getting it right. And he's putting himself out there and he's making some amazing advances for us, for the guys and gals still fighting the good fight. So without further ado, Tom Rizzo, thank you, brother, for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And the feeling is mutual, John. I follow your stuff as well, and I'm game. I love the partnership. I love the networking. Like great minds think alike. That's the way I like to look at it. And
Yeah, brother.
and I think when you combine energy and you put the good energy out there, it certainly comes back to you, tenfold. So I thank you so much for the opportunity. I really do.
No, man, it's my pleasure. It's I did 30 years in a very, if you were to look at my organization, probably one of the most toxic. It's just at every turn, right? And there's so many good people within the organization trying to do
Sure.
great things. But it was a sheriff's office. Tom, 7 sheriffs I worked for. How do you get consistency and message and a vision, right? So you've got all these people struggling, like trying to make sense of it every 4 years. And it's just
Impossible.
super
Yeah.
difficult, right?
Yeah,
So there's a
sure.
bunch of great people at my old agency that that are trying their darndest, man, to get it right for the folks beneath them. And you came up, I liken that, you start off the book with, you mentioned, the kamikaze pilot, his mission, man. It was a no-win, right? Take the plane, fly it into a ship, God bless, have
Mhm.
some sake, rock on.
That's it.
And what are we asking the people filling out job applications nowadays?
Same thing.
If they're brave enough to go in there and grab an application or click submit on the online form, right? Talk
Mhm.
about that real quick, Tom, about that analogy you used.
So, I knew what I wanted to put out there as to the purpose of the book, right? And I knew I wanted to do it from a trifold effect in terms of I wanted to obviously make it primarily for police officers to help, right?
Sure.
And obviously to share in not the war story part of it, but because I pale in comparison to people like yourself and other people throughout the country that have far more experience than I do. It was more of I want to talk about the taboo topics that we're not talking about to make a difference. For the cop, yes, for the families, certainly,
Right.
right, that we're not allowed to discuss or we don't discuss them well.
They've been on the job since day one with us.
100%. And then ironically, and I know I took some shots for this, but to appeal, right? Not to get agreement, but to appeal to the opposition is because again, who's singing our message? And then you wonder why the opposition movement grows. So where I got the kamikaze thing from, and and I had an imagery done. The graphics for the book were done by a fellow overseas, which is I was so blessed to have him do it for me.
Right.
Was just that's what's the difference. Yeah, so what is it? It's you trying to ride the badge, ride the job on a flame, inevitably doomed to crash, right? And
Right.
if I'm wrong, show me where I'm wrong. What are we doing to equip our people? Not, and I'm not talking about making it through a career, but I'm saying making it through and then still be a whole version of yourself when you're
How about
done. What are we
thriving?
doing?
How about thriving? How about wanting to wake up every morning excited about the challenges of the day? Is that the psyche of the cop out there on the street right
No,
now?
the psyche is, and I took this from a dear friend of mine who told me years ago that cops and convicts are the only two people who count time backwards.
Oh,
You meet a cop, you meet a cop. What do I
oh
say?
my
Hey, how you
God.
doing? I'm
How
Tom.
many
Nice to meet you.
days? How many days, brother?
Yeah, three to go. What are you in
Oh
for?
my
Oh,
God.
policing.
So in your introduction, who who would possibly want to become a police officer considering the advent of modern times, what we've got going on? And we kind of talked about this before we officially started. It's not pay. Listen, Uh, um, Anybody in this game, unlimited. What if you're willing to work, you can rock out easily. It's not pay. It's not the danger. Listen, you know who's got a dangerous job? The guys that work for FP&L on the poles that fix the electricity. That's a dangerous job. Uh, I don't. I shut the power off to the whole neighborhood when I got to change a light bulb. All right, electricity scares me. So it's not the danger. Actually, the danger is the thing that pulls us, right? Like that
I think
unknown.
so.
That's a positive, actually. The danger. Um, what is it in your what is it that's keeping this profession from excelling from swarms of people flocking to this profession? Is it a very minor segment of the community that has a vocal pedestal when why don't we have the throngs of people joining the law enforcement ranks? You couldn't get hired when I started 30 years ago. I had to move to get a job down in Florida because I couldn't get on with the mass stadies.
And again, I think that the solidarity, the fraternity, the sorority, and the bond and the glue has eroded in such a way. I don't think it's a generational thing, how some people cast that allegation. I don't. I think it's because as soon as you're entry now into it or association to it. So now if someone knows me, let's say, right, and they're contemplating a career, but they see me with the Pac-Man bites all over my body, right?
Right.
From where? Inside the building, not on the street. They'll say, well, why the hell would I want to do that to myself? And it's because you're taking daily doses of toxicity and daily doses of poison when you're at the job. And people say that cliche, it's just not worth it. Divorce, broken relationships, abuse, substance abuse. I mean, all these things, depression, suicide ideologies. I mean, it's just not worth it. So the allure, right, has been dulled and numbed to a sense that, well, that's silly. Why would I do that? And that's where we're not doing a good job. And you see, and then what do? As to be predicted, we treat the oncoming or the existing as if we're prostitutes. What do I mean? Well, here, let me dangle a benefit in front of you. Let me dangle a sign-on bonus. Let me dangle some type of, fringe benefit. And what we run there, drooling, licking our lips. Oh, okay, it's a little bit of overtime. It's a little bit more of this. Cool. Just like you would if you were working the streets.
And to be fair, right? To be fair, there are some agencies that have figured it out.
100%.
And they're smaller agencies because obviously the larger you lose the span of control, and
Yep.
it's hard to get all your commanders, all your divisions and districts on the same page.
Yep.
I spoke over at Tavares with Sarah Corsi.
Yeah.
35, 40 man department. And when I mean to tell you, happy, excited,
Yep.
committed to each other,
Yep.
all the things that you and I are trying to fix in some medium to large size agencies. She understands that it's not family, but
Sure.
we can have familial relationships, and we can have each other's back, and we can support each other, and we cannot, who does a good job of that? Some specialized units, like
Sure.
let's say a SWAT team.
Yep.
You don't talk shit about a guy. If you're not on the SWAT team, you don't have standing. You better not talk about somebody on the team, or somebody's going to drop you.
Right.
Right? They defend, right? And I think that's just, listen, I don't like dummying things down, man. But if we just gave a shit a little bit more about each other, I think that ripple effect would be huge. I want to be a part of an organization where people have each other's back, not on some bumper sticker, right? That looks cool, but truly, we don't need it. We eat our own right now, and we got to stop.
Well, again, or what about just looking at the definition of a contradiction, right? What's my point? You treat each other inside the building. That's why I always talk about the four walls versus the four corners. If you don't worry about what's happening within your four walls, and let's say it's a toxic situation inside the four walls, and you don't even say good morning, you don't even say good afternoon, you don't even say good night, you don't hold doors for people, right? But yeah, the leadership element and the command element expects the operation to go out then into the motoring public and be empathetic and connecting toward strangers. Think about that for a moment.
Tom.
We allege to,
Oh
oh
my
yeah,
God.
I'm my brother's keeper, and I would take a round for this one and that one. Well, that's the definition of a contradiction. I call it the shelter pet theory, right? You take a dog, you take a junkyard dog. Inside that dog is still a family pet somewhere deep down.
Right.
Why will that dog bite, bark, or lunge when you walk by it? Well, it's been neglected. It can't turn around. Its environment has created the demeanor of that dog. But now, if I were just to walk into that junkyard, take that dog, muzzled and all, with a leash, and bring him out into the community for a petting show, what's it going to do when I let it off? It's going to snap.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right.
We're humans. When you come into a police department to check in for a shift, you're John. You're not
my
officer any damn
God.
thing. When you work the shift, you're still John. And you know what comes with that, John? Somebody who cares, somebody who's capable of getting pissed off, right? Let me ask you this, John. Let me ask you this. What's the psychological standard to get hired or go for fit for duties? It's the most people standard. You're supposed to align with most people, right? So to get hired, to get promoted, if you're involved in some type of situation where your fitness is being questioned, good or bad, most people. How do you align with most people?
Right.
Okay, now put a uniform on me. Somebody comes by and throws an egg at me and I scream at them. Most people would scream at that person, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying we want it,
At a minimum.
but I'm saying, and again, I'm being hypothetical. I'm being
Yes, of
hypothetical.
course.
But then what will we have though? What will we have? An ABC police department will have a man or a woman in a uniform with all sorts of garb and titles and acronyms and accolades standing behind a podium apologizing for the demeanor of the person, instead of saying, yeah, listen, we don't like that our officers to be depicted this way.
Right.
But did anybody see what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want our officers. You know who does a good job of that? Grady Judd.
Of course.
He had 3 officers at the podium that were suspects.
Yeah.
He said, hey, these guys, I sat with these guys and they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And they're being removed and they're being prosecuted. A week ago, he was at the same podium saying, not, these are my people. I have their back. If you shoot at them, they're going to shoot you. They're going to kill you. They're going to drop you. I mean, right. We have our leadership, I think, has been so consumed with the optics of and building relationships with the community, Tom. They've done that at the expense of building internal relationships with their people.
100%.
And it's just,
John,
it's an easy fix, man.
But that's also because we're so smart. And yes, I'm being sarcastic. We have leadership elements and we have leadership factions that are telling communities what they need for partnership and engagement, because we're ego driven and we're smarter, especially than some of these urban communities, some of these rural communities, whereas the ones that really got it down, in my opinion, from what I've seen, I've been to over 35 states. The ones that really have it down are the ones that ego-less ask the community, what do you expect from us? And you know what you'll get sometimes? We don't really care or give a damn if you're here handing out teddy bears or doing dance-offs. We know you don't want to be here. We don't think it's genuine. We're good. You know what we want? We want our dignity to be upheld. Right. We're not all suspects. Some of us are doing the best we can and have to live in these circumstances. And we also want the criminals removed. Yeah. However, we just want to, kind of have just a common human decency and interactions when and if we see you guys. But other than that, we're good. But that's not good enough for us, see, because that doesn't get clicks and that doesn't get all the claps.
We're trying to grab and hug them, and they're like, "I don't want to be hugged, man. Just do your job. I don't want it. Just do your job."
But then what happens? Then police officers come together and give this subliminal middle finger to those segments of community, saying they all hate us, when in fact they don't. I'm gonna tell you right now, I hate dentists. I don't like going.
Right.
Okay. All I want is to get in, get out. Yeah. That's a mutual respect. That's it.
Right.
We have to be okay with the fact that not everybody's gonna fly blue.
You don't want to take a picture with me? Oh my!
I'm good. I'm good.
We spent so Tom. I remember my old command, swales. We're going to put swales and we're going to have community barbecues. You know who was at the community barbecues?
Uh-huh.
The command staff, the poor SOBs that were assigned to community involvement.
Yep.
And there was always us and nobody at these events. Nobody
But
from the
again,
community.
but why? Because it's disingenuous and we're not
That's
giving
what,
people
and they take the picture. They grab 3 skulls off the street and say, "Come over
take a
here,
picture.
let's take a picture."
But
Oh,
John, we don't have the ability anymore to hide the truth. And the truth
oh,
is social media, people talk, news outlets,
right,
everything. The truth is the word spreads. And guess what? In normal conversation, honest cops turn around and tell people,
right,
I don't want to be there either.
right,
If you want the truth. You know
right,
why? I choose to spend my time the way I spend it,
right.
and you don't care for me. I don't necessarily identify with you and what you guys do or don't do, and that's okay.
Yeah,
There's certain delicacies I don't care for. I mean, it's okay. We can be honest with each other. But if I happen to have a hot cup of coffee and a spare one, and I see you freezing your ass off, how about without the cameras on me? I should be able, no matter what that person looks like,
right.
even if they have a criminal or a rap sheet, I should be able to say, hey man, here, you
Hey,
need a like
right. That. I mean,
that's where the engagement
that's
happens.
what we do, man. That's and it's just that's when we're. I mean, listen. I always say we don't have to like each other to care about each other.
Yeah,
Liking and caring don't have anything to do with each other. I don't like a lot of people, and I'm sure the feelings are mutual, but I care, man.
yeah,
I want nothing but the best for everybody. I want you to have a happy life. I want you to take care of your family. I don't want, I want you free from harm, right?
yeah,
I want you to thrive.
yeah.
Um, and we can't get that message out.
But
We,
I got to tell you though, and I'm the poster child of this because it bled into my house, and and I own that. This cynicism and this hardened shell, and that this it's us versus them, and you believe this crap, and a lot of it has to do with, in my opinion, experience, not years on the job, but I think in life experience to see it's not that everywhere you go that the odds are stacked against you. It's not that people are always, so
no,
that's why I'm so passionate about what I'm spitting, is because if we don't do a better job at that, you're still gonna all you're gonna have is repeat circumstances of cops with broken relationships and this false sense of cynicism that's gonna bleed into their personal lives,
right.
and it's never gonna get better because you know as well as I do, we could pretend all day that when you punch in for a shift that you don't bring home with you, but that's such an ignorant thing. So
No
it's
doubt.
that you had to paint the room and it didn't work out. The kid's sick. The bills are piling up. Oh no, I know that all just flows out of my head now while I'm working. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Right.
But that's what I mean. But then if we started to do better with identifying with that, we can then teach our cops to identify with the person you just pulled over. That, yeah, I get it. Their seatbelt wasn't on. They might have just as much, if not more, than you have going on right now.
Right.
So just kind of like I do this part of my class, right? And I say, here, you want community engagement? I'm going to show you how to do it dollar free. And they're like, what? I said, your 5 senses. And I go with this imagery and I say, you have eyes, you have ears, you have a nose, you have a mouth, and you have hands, right? So I say, a noise complaint. I play this sound that's piercing, and everybody goes like this. I go, that sound sucks, right?
Right.
Why is it any different though now? For you, it sucks. So now when you're out on patrol and you get the noise complaint, you roll your eyes because people, well, maybe that sound really sucks for them. And their kid just went to bed. Like, you see what I mean? A person's house floods and they have the different race than you. I know, right? You can't relate to them that way, but you know what you could relate to? If you ever had a leaky pipe in your house, you think the world's over.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm saying it's so easy. We all, don't tell me we don't have the ability to make a connection. It's not about the dance offs. It's not about the giveaways. Stop. Take that down. It's simple. I really believe it's simple. I do.
Caring, that old adage, treat people the way you'd like to be treated, man. I mean,
Great.
do we have to get real technical about it? Treat people the
Oh,
way you'd like to be treated, man. Treat people, how do you want to treat the way I would like you to treat my mom, man, right? Treat my mom that way, right? I mean, come on.
and But John, it's not happening inside. Like I said, I go back to inside the four walls, because then what we're getting this is, well, pay your dues. And there's a certain sense that I believe in that, where, certain types of things come with seniority, and that's fine.
Right.
I'm saying, but now when we forget that, what it was like when you and I were young and getting married, buying a house, having kids, like when we said, that's why I call my class the ivory tower, because as you separate in rank and experience, if you lose the connection with where you came from in terms of what it was like for you,
Right. You end up
I
in
didn't
that
say we
ivory
need,
tower, man.
but I'm
You
saying, I'm not
detached.
saying,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we need to hug it out every morning when we go into work, but I'm saying, when you lose the fact that, hey, yeah, this guy, he's going through a little valley in terms of productivity. Well, right. What was it like for you when you had this going on in your life? You
Right.
see what I'm trying? It's that
Sure.
simple.
It's,
That's all.
I think, I don't want to be overly simplistic, man, but it's about being human, man. About being human, and not having amnesia about where you were at that
Yeah.
same point in life, and maybe, our abilities to have some empathy, and we're in an amazing position to do something about it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times we take a pass on it. Our frontline leadership, our sergeants, I never rose above the rank, but I thought that I had the most impact at that rank. I knew what your kids were doing. I knew who was playing soccer. I knew what you had going. I knew if things were going good with you or the old lady, or they weren't. I There wasn't really much, because I made it my business to know
Sure.
what was going on with you, and I think it put me in a unique position to care. Right. Um, our frontline leaderships, because we don't have the masses flocking, I think we're creating a problem. I think, maybe you check me on this. Experience, right? There's no, you can't replace experience.
No.
And what we have, I think now, unfortunately, is a lot of guys that may mean well, but they don't have the work experience or the life experience to step into that role. And maybe they did good on a test. They're good test takers. Now, your program addresses a lot of leadership, and gives guys some foundations to be an excellent leader. I saw your post, somebody that read your book and applied some of your lessons, and rewired. I think the term they used was rewired the way they saw their role. Not only did they get selected for a detective assignment, but uh, 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 not an entry level detective assignment. He wasn't a property crimes. He went right to, violent crimes. And then on top of that, he's receiving all sorts of accolades and, awards, because he's thriving now, because he's figured out
Yep.
what you got going on here, and he's applied it. He's taken action. Um, in your book, you put, and I'm going to paraphrase, but you put, we have all these metrics for measuring who's going to be a good leader, but the one thing I think universally across the board that is absent is a peer review.
And not just even a peer review, because you have to be careful. I know of popularity contests, right? Sure, that's a real thing. But I always laugh where I say, we all know, you ever walk into a police department and you could always say, hey, who should be a boss here? And everybody always will point somebody out that inherently is not a
Yeah.
boss.
That's the guy I'm
So,
going through the door with. That's the guy that's setting a perimeter.
and then you have to ask yourself why. So where I laugh is, I even created a system where, supervisors sometimes are bad at it regardless, in terms of acknowledging their people. But what I liked was peer to peer, be able to recognize each other so that people know. What do I mean by that? Well, Patrolman Tom and Patrolman John are out on a call, and Patrolman John performs really well. It gives me an opportunity now to send something, and it goes to the supervision, and it goes to the administration of, hey, I watched John kick ass out there, handle a scene, be empathetic. He was investigative. He was thorough. He was comprehensive. He talked people down. He made an arrest with professionalism. I mean, whatever. And it's that, holy cow, he's really good at what he does, or she's really good at what she does. Like, so it's how do we know? And the reason why I say is it's in times of crisis, change, and instability that you're going to see the cream rise to the top. But what if they only get an 80 on a test? They're never going to make it. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's ridiculous.
I think, they've tried to, I think, bridge the gap with assessment setters and all that, and but that's not real world, right? There's no danger. There's no consequences to you failing. And it's a simple enough process, I think, to institute. I just think that maybe, again, getting back to the decision makers, then that questions their role.
Yeah.
Like if we adopt this method of review, then the lieutenant is checking the captain's checking the major, right?
Yeah.
And the major's checking the undersheriff. And that's fine if you're rocking it out and doing a great job. Yeah, how can I improve? Yeah, you know what? I'm not the best communicator. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'm going to work on that. But
sure,
I think there's a fear there that if I'm going to be exposed, maybe for not the best leader that I probably should be.
Which is okay. So I believe in a bifold system. I think that you definitely need a system of incentive based to take care of the worker bees, because there's certain worker bees that aren't meant to, in my opinion, be in a leadership component. They're A plus. I mean, they are your A players.
Right.
But not necessarily sometimes the best players were meant to be the best coaches. So what I say is you have to incentivize, but you have to incentivize the hard workers, because then it's going to say, well, what the hell am I doing this for? So I love the fact of plain clothes, outer vest carriers, facial hair. You know what I mean by that, right?
Of course.
Whatever. Some type of cookie that you recognize, I'm working more than the person to the right or to the person to the left of me.
Sure.
Now, in the other way is what I like is almost like a business plan, a strategic plan. I want to see how somebody has done problem solving, has influenced other people, have done something that was selfless, that affected other people, and they didn't benefit from it. I mean, their communication skills, their conflict resolution, these are the things that you're going to need in a leader role, but they aren't sexy, and again, and that's where we fail. So I see it where in our state, in the state of New Jersey, they got away. You can't measure the proactive statistics anymore. So you can't use arrests. You can't use car. So they've identified, we know that that's not the way to do it, but now they're like this. I love it. I love a green red. You need a basic knowledge, of course, an assessment of knowledge. You need job knowledge, agreed.
Of course.
But not an over reliance. And then what you do is you have a green red. So now you have these people in a green pool, and then you say, what's the vacancy now? So if you have a basic, and I'm not disparaging it, but if you have a basic patrol sergeant position, okay, well, we know these green players are pretty good at it here. But now if you have an investigative position that became available, right? Well, hey, patrolman so-and-so in the green pool has shown amazing reports, amazing follow-up skills, tech savvy. Here's my come. I don't care that John beat him on a numerical score.
His skill sets are different. He's applied himself differently.
And I do believe that's the future of it. Private sector is coming down on us hardcore, and they're saying, look, this is the way we do it in the private sector. This is the way we do it in the private sector, The days of the 100 question multiple choice test, and then a Chiefs panel to come in who are all winking at who they want.
The decision was made last week, right?
Come on. You're falling asleep. You're falling asleep during my test, and then come on.
And that's. I had a boss once who thought we were all equal. Everybody brought the exact same thing to the table. We were all interchangeable, and I went, "Hey, boss, absolutely not, man. Like, I have some guys that cannot stand in front of a class. They're excellent one-on-one, but that environment, they're not showing their strong suit. So I want to use him where he's absolutely a rock star. And that's on one-on-one follow-up instruction. That's my guy. I love talking in front of people. You can't shut me up. I'm going to give the briefing.
Yeah.
When we break out, I mean, it's about utilizing people's strengths, identifying, and not just because you scored. We're trying to cram a square peg in a round hole.
Well, but and again, the
Can't do
private,
that.
I ran it. So I always tell the story in class. I was stuck at Atlanta airport for like 30 hours, and I befriended a very, very affluent business guy. He has offices in 22 countries, worth a ton of money. He's in a tech business, and ironically, the book had just been released, so I had my copy, and I'm going, and we get to talking as to what I do, what he does. And he said, he goes, you know what's funny? He goes, your problem is in your industry is like in my industry. He goes, we wouldn't take the guy or the girl who's the best at putting together the motherboards. And then just because they do it the fastest and the best and they produce the most, we take care of them and we covet them and we reward them. But they wouldn't then take them to be the HR person. So he's like, you guys, like, he goes, you constantly are squeezing and forcing, and then you wonder why you have the problems that you have. He goes, it's in your metrics. It's in your metrics. And he coined the term. He goes, it's actually more like mass tricks. And it's literally, it's like pulling the cloak over people's eyes, because you all know that it's not going to be the person best suited to lead anybody. And then when you have a leadership problem, say, well, oh, gee, I can't believe that happened.
Throws their hands up and goes, why?
But right, look, what's one of the biggest things that we have? We have military and combat vets coming in, right?
Right.
So you're going to tell me now, and this is a very careful subject for me, okay, near and dear to my heart.
Sure.
You're going to tell me somebody who's been to a foreign land, okay, that has been in life or death situations, number one. Number two, has also had to blend cultures, okay? You talk
Most
about
certainly.
being able, but then they score an 80 on a test. I mean, I'm who do you want to make critical decisions? Who do you want to go into a hot call and be able to operate like this? I mean, and I'm not saying it's just a love affair for the military, but I'm giving that example. Somebody who may have
experience.
what about I fell in love with a candidate recently that, you know what his experience was to me that floored me? He was the primary caretaker for a sibling who was severely disabled. And I'm like, this is a young kid. I know. So and now I get into arguments. Oh, but he's young. I'm like, he has more life experience.
The responsibility. Oh my God.
I said he has more life experience and empathy and ability than somebody with 4 college degrees. I'm telling you that flat out.
Right. That's a candidate that you need to scoop up. That's
But you
amazing.
see, this is my point though, John. Until we get away from that's the way we've always done it, it's not going to improve.
Yeah. And you know what? And this is pushing that conversation. It's a slow push, man. It's a slow push. But I've got a saying, it's not unique. Things didn't get effed up overnight, so they're not going to get fixed overnight. And everybody wants immediate change.
But John, I think it's only growing though. I mean, I know for me, and because I think what you have is not because you have people like us out there. I think you have now finally a newfound sense of self-confidence that I'm not afraid. And what I mean by that, I don't care anymore. And I mean it in a nice way, in a respectful way. I've had people come up to me, oh, well, the stuff that you say, and I'm like, yeah, okay. If we're not going to have an honest conversation, there's no point in having the conversation. And they do, they get upset at me. Right. I've been to these white glove things, and I get, well, it sounds like you're being ultra critical of, administrations and this and that. I said, well, I'm being very critical of how we landed here. Yes, I am, including my active participation in the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay? You've taken ownership of that. But so does that mean that we can never talk about ways to improve? I mean,
yes, come on. Because why? That's acknowledging you contributed.
You know what? It kills me. And listen, it starts with owning it. And I want to go into this next. I have written down for the longest time in this profession, there is an inability of our leadership to admit when they've made a mistake.
Yes.
And they not only do they not have the ability to admit when they make a mistake, they double down on a bad decision. And it just, God, I want to think like we're so much better than that. Everybody in the room knows that this is not going to work. And all it would take to turn this thing around was for somebody to go, hey, that was a bad call on my part. I own that. How do we fix it? And you want to talk about rallying the troops, right?
Yep.
Um, but there's a good majority of the bosses out there that refuse to do that. And
That's because their own personal insecurity, though, and the invective that gets thrown every day. What and again, and you know what happens? Hurt people hurt people. So you then have that fear. So then what do? You exploit other mistakes to minimize the fact that everybody knows you made one. And you go for the low-lying fruit and you exploit those mistakes on the low-lying fruit,
right.
especially for people that are not of rank or whatever. And those are the ones we crush down. And where I always say it should be +1. You're the one who made the choice to ascend in rank. You're the one who made the choice to ascend in, ascend in stature. Well, that should come with more responsibility, not less responsibility.
Yeah. You wrote in here, um, my wishes are based on this final lesson, right? Progress is, you have the quote, progress is more important than perfection. Listen, um, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Much like myself, I'm sure you failed in life,
Several times.
and the strength and the growth comes from failure.
Yep.
And we haven't embraced that. But there's still a majority that thinks that failure is the death note. Failure is the end. I would submit to you that failure is the beginning. Failure is where all the growth learning comes from. And you fail when you're not afraid to try something, because we've got people waiting for it to be perfect. And you know what, I'm not gonna pull the trigger on this, not quite yet, because and there's always something. Tom, speak to that, because it's one of the things that I think there's a lot of takeaways already for the listeners, but I want them to hear your take on this, brother.
Yeah, so the reason why I wrote that in terms of progress is so much more important and fearless of failure is because I think the community that we purport to serve would embrace us so much better. What I mean by that is if we were to show, hey, wait a minute, time out. Let's just look at the past decade alone of the things we've done. Some of the things we failed at, but any other industry would have went belly up or bankrupt over. Okay, we've endured an opiate epidemic, we've endured a pandemic, we've endured civil disobedience, we've endured political uprisings. We don't have the requisite skills, resources, tools, or abilities to be adequately prepared for that. So even if we score a C- in a category, I want to show you how we've progressed to be flexible and adaptable. So what I always say is, why don't we highlight that and get people to understand? Look at the other industries. The medical industry always has a laundry list of excuses. The service industry, oh, sorry, hey, we're doing the best we can. We have reduced every other
Supply
industry.
chain issues. Yeah.
Yeah. I even asked the other day, I told, my friend this, I was at a business and the bill came, the invoice came, and it said service charge, right? So I said, what's that for? I was just curious.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said, is that the gratuity? Because I'll leave a gratuity, no problem. They said, no, the gratuity's separate. I said, well, then what's a service charge? They went, well, ever since COVID. So I went, oh, I mean, that's just what we do now, I guess. But what do police departments do? With less, still go there and be afraid to highlight the fact of, hey guys, I'm gonna let you in on a secret. We're not robots, okay? We're human beings. Human beings are perfectly imperfect, and with that comes mistakes. And I'm going to show you when we make a mistake. I'm also going to show you when we get it right. And I'm going to show you when we absolutely did our best. We inherently tried to do our best. Doesn't mean we always get it right. And I think people would start to see us as, guess what, John? Not a uniform
Human
and a
beings.
human being.
Oh my God. Yeah, Tom, that's it's completely within our reach. Complete within our reach. We
Right.
and with that, I think comes the need for some humility, right?
Yeah. Well, again, imagine that, right? Imagine egos and narcissism taking a back row. But again, why would they? Why would they when our industry does the opposite? Our industry does the opposite and we allow it and we perpetuate it. I think that I call it the infiltration of politics, local politics, especially into
Oh,
police departments, serve that well. They serve the ego and they serve the toxicity well, and they certainly, fuel the fires. So yeah, humility would be a godsend right now.
It's how do you argue with somebody that has humility? How, you
Well,
know,
you
how,
that's
right?
and that's what I mean. Those are the people that I am so attracted to because I'm like, wow, here's somebody who is proud when they get it right.
Yep.
They're confident, not cocky, but man, are they the ones that they have their mind and their heart connected. They want to do it for the right reasons, and they are the first ones to acknowledge and say, they welcome input because they're vulnerable. They know, hey, I'm going to expose where my shortcomings are, and it makes me so much more effective if I welcome you as part of the team. I use a quote, and you could share this. I say all the time. So me at 100% doing my job is good, right? I want to be that. But what if for a moment I stopped focusing on me as 100%, and I started instead to focus on changing other people around me just 1%. If I changed 100 people 1%, that's a movement,
Sure
and
it
that's how
is.
you keep the game being played.
That makes perfect sense, man. It gets back to caring about others more than you care about yourself. I
Right.
have a saying, and feel free to steal it. I know that I don't know.
Yeah.
W- w-
And
It just it moves people, right? I mean,
but I also think now, and hindsight being 2020, as I get older, I learned this. I wish I learned it sooner. But I also think investing in yourself is very wise in terms of, I call it the fill and spill, carrying a cup everywhere you go that's a balanced cup so that you could pour your good stuff into people and
right.
you could take on some of their good stuff as well. And that puts you in a position where you keep a balance, because if you put too much into your cup and don't focus on yourself, you end up spilling, right? And
Right.
unfortunately, where do you spill it? It's onto the laps of people that don't deserve it.
No, no doubt. That's a great analogy, man, for how we do that. And that brings us to chapter 11, glass half full or half empty, man. And
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
we, being mindful, mindfulness, all these key words that we're bringing to this profession of ours. Mindfulness, again, caring about others, knowing how what you do and how that impacts people around you and that ripple effect. It's huge. Tom, I want to be respectful of your time. Can you for us, for the guy or the gal that's zipping around, man, that's on their way home from a night or on their way into work, getting ready to do that 10-12 hour shift,
Yep.
something that you want to share with them, a thought, a philosophy. I mean, the book is amazing. I'm going to reference it in the show notes, and we're going to ask you before we wrap up how we can see you and get with you. Something for them, though, from Tom that maybe help them through a tough time, or just some words of wisdom that you'd love to share with them. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, no worries. So two things. Number one, always knowing that time never stands still. A river doesn't stand still. It's the persistence that always wins. So I always say taking the E out of the emotion. Motion will always continue forward. Just take the E out of it and recognize the difference between taking things personally and taking things seriously will always bid well. The other part of it is to never lose sight of the fact that you work for yourself. You work with an agency, you work with a department. Knowing the difference, because you yourself, you have your own code, you have your own standards, your own goals, your own expectations. You don't have to worry about fitting some type of mold that somebody else created. That's theirs.
I
So
love it.
when you know your destination and where you intend that you want to go, it doesn't matter how the path went. It doesn't have to be John's path, Tom's path, or anybody else's. You go your path, and always just don't lose sight of the fact that you work for yourself. So there's going to be things that you have to do that other people prescribe, and you check those off. But then, my goodness, what a cool industry to be in, where the rest of the day really is up to you. And if you make that differentiation and you separate those two emotions, I think all of a sudden the days don't seem as long, and the minutes don't seem to be hours and the like, and it just doesn't feel as heavy of a lift.
Man, that is, man, know who you are and what you represent, your moral compass, man. That is
Yeah,
awesome. Hey,
yeah,
Tom, where we spoke prior, you've got
yeah,
some events coming up in Florida. I'm a
yeah,
Florida guy. That's my base,
yeah,
man. So
yeah.
what do you got coming up if you could share that with the listeners?
Yeah, so I mean, I have several classes that I'll be teaching ivory tower. I'm actually starting to do, looking to do some private sector things, speaking engagements, keynotes. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me and see where I'm going to be, what I'm doing, or if they have an interest in having me come speak, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Obviously, I'm on there. I'm on Instagram. My email is rizzothomas3@gmail. The book is Kapakazi, but I'm on a mission for 2023. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah, brother, you and me both. Tom
Yeah, man.
Rizzo, thank you for your time, brother.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, man. Nothing but the best for you. Lots of love coming your way to you and your family.
Thank you.
Ladies
Same
and
to you.
gentlemen, Tom Rizzo.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Take
brother.
care, bro. All right, man.